a PS Placeable build guide. I had to split this video into two separate videos, so we'll have a 2000 and a 3000 build guide. Obviously, most of this information is already on the website. I have them broken down into steps. We have 1 through 5 essentially. It's important to follow steps 1 through 5. If you jump in at any point, you might be super lost. So start out with how you're gonna get the parts. You can either buy them from me or you can source them yourself. Both options are available and there are guides for both options. If you buy from us, there are a couple different options you can choose. You can do a full kit where you get all the parts and you build it yourself using your PSP. You can get just the motherboard and you can print the parts yourself. All those options are broken down there. Step 2 is firmware. PSP firmware. It's important that you update your PSP to 6.61. It's up to you if you want to use custom firmware, but updating it before you do the build is super important. Also, none of the mod boards ship with firmware, so you want to install that as well. There's a guide here to do that. I'm not going to walk through every super detail for those things, but in the video you'll see me do those steps. So I'll talk about them when we get there. Everything is here, picture guides, there's tons of pictures. I did my best to describe all the steps, but I know that some people, myself included, are visual learners, so I wanted to also put a video together to show you guys what that looks like. So here on the website you can see the guide will be out soon, which you're currently watching, so I'll change that. The frequently asked questions page is a total mess. So if you have been lost on the FAQ page, I'm gonna work on reorganizing that so it is way more sensible. I was really just kind of uploading information as it came in. I've had this page up since the start of the website and it shows you a couple different video out options. I don't have time, unfortunately, to go into all of the details of video out. Plan to do a whole video on that. I'm not sure when that will come out, but for now, questions about video out will be reorganized on the FAQ page. Let's get into the actual build guide. I have the 3000 and the 2000 version PSP that we'll be using for the two separate build guides. The 3000 is already updated, the 2000 is not, so we'll do an update. I really encourage everybody, before you do these builds, to test all of these things ahead of time. Make sure that you read a UMD. Okay, the 3000 here does not, the 2000 does. So the 3000 needs to be fixed. The 2000 will work for UMD reading, which is great. But when we plug in the 2000 with the video out, the display button should be held for about 8 seconds and it should auto switch to the TV out. This 2000 does not want to do that. So that's an issue for this build, right? Fortunately, I was able to fix that later, but here's the example of what that should look like on the 3000. See that little screen pops up and then it auto switches to our TV out. Okay, and I'm just going right into a capture card so you guys can see that directly, what's on the TV in front of me there. Pressing the button brings you back to the PSP. Okay, that's what it should look like. It's important to do those tests ahead of time. Here are our kits. This is what you'll get if you buy a kit from me. We're gonna focus on the 2000 here because this is the 2000 version build guide, okay? So you'll get, if you buy from me, a shell and a full motherboard kit. You will get a shell that looks like this. We have to do a little post-processing, so you'll get the base looking like this, where the actual support pegs are still left in. I do that for shipping purposes, so all you have to do is open up your kit, and you'll find some screws in this little bag here, but let's pull everything out so you can see what comes with the kit. So every kit has 4 ribbon cables, okay? You'll have 2 10 pins, a 14 pin, and then the custom 4-pin ribbon cable that we designed for the analog stick. And then also there's an LED pre-soldered for you to some cables. But we'll set that aside for now. We're gonna pull out what's in the small bag here, which is the feet, the SD card holder, the buttons that go into the shell, and then we'll have 4 black screws and 4 tiny silver screws, along with 8 magnets. All of that's probably gonna be stuck together. Okay, the 4 black screws are for the base. The silver screws are for the motherboard. All you have to do is take one of your black screws and you can just push from the top of the holes here, and it'll just pop these little supports out. Okay, if you don't do that, you won't be able to screw your shell together, so it's important that you do that. Just go through and pop all 4 of those out. You might have some like little leftover plastic pieces. If you take some tweezers, you can just pop those little pieces out. It should be relatively flat on all 4 holes there, because our feet will cover up those screw holes when we're done. All right, so that's pretty much all you'll need to do with the base. The middle might have a small support left in the LED hole here. I saw a couple people's builds online where they left this in. This can come out, it's supposed to come out. So take some tweezers. I just usually push it to the left and to the right of the little centerpiece there, and then it should just pop right out. The only reason that comes in is because usually I forget to take it out. So just pop that out and you'll be good to go. A little piece should look like that. That should be all the post-processing you'll have to do. The rest of your shell should look exactly like this, and then you know you're good to go. So we'll set the middle and top and even base aside for now, because we won't need them just yet. All right, let's take apart our PSP. Okay, so once again, this is the 2000 build guide, so your PSP should roughly look like mine. It should have the fatter ring on the back, and then like it says in the corner there, PSP 2000. For the most part, the teardown is the same, at least externally. Once we get inside, there's some big differences between the 2000 and the 3000. But for all PSPs, we gotta pull off that warranty sticker. I hate to break it to you, but we're gonna be out of warranty doing this mod. But I think all PSP warranties expired many years ago. So I'm gonna flash through here, but there's 4 screws in the back. Then there is 1 screw on the bottom in the middle, and there's 2 screws on the top, and we'll take all of those out. We want to set aside the 4 screws in the back because we're going to be using those later, so make sure you hold on to those. We'll reuse those 4 screws to screw the full PSP into the mod board base. All right, so this is the inside. There are 5 black screws that we want to remove, and we actually want to hold on to a few of them, so just put them in the pile of screws we're holding on to. We'll take all 5 of them out now, since that makes the most sense. Okay, and then for the 2000s, you can just pull these top parts off. Once again, we're gonna hold on to the little top corner pieces here. There's a left and a right one. You definitely need the right one. You can use the left one. I've been putting both back in, but definitely you'll need the right one. All right, then there's a little tab you'll pop out for the middle buttons. And then if you push the whole screen to the left, it should kind of pop up and forward. And then we'll undo this clasp and this clasp for the screen. This is the middle buttons. This is the left connector, the right connector, okay? Those are important to know because the center, left, and right connectors are the ones that we'll be accessing later. If you push this tab to the side, the speaker should pop out. We'll also remove this metal piece. I removed the heatsink later, but you can also take that off now if yours is removable. Some 2000s, they're like attached. So if it's attached, don't remove it. But if it just has that little piece of tape there, feel free to take it off. We'll lift up the left side here. The right side, tweezers help here to just pull this up. And then this is taped down, so you might need to use a little bit of pulling force here. I'm a little more aggressive than you might want to be. I have no plan on keeping any of these parts. I actually give them to somebody who fixes PSPs so they can use them for their builds. But if you're hoping to hold on to all your parts, maybe be a little more gentle than I am. Hold your finger at the top of the power connector here. I have pulled off quite a few of the connectors from the board, so I usually push down on it from the top there and then pull straight back. Then we'll pull our pins here because we're gonna pull out these 2 ribbon cables as well. These are both for the UMD. We'll need to reconnect them in a little bit. But here's that removable heatsink for, I believe it's 8.5 models. I don't know the exact model number, but you're looking at your PSP right now, so you should know if it looks like mine or not. Okay, then what I do here is I just rotate this out. You can remove the little like wireless ribbon there at the top corner and then pull the whole motherboard out, but I just fold it forward. That's easiest for me, but if you want to take it totally out, that's okay too. All right, this part's important here. This is the only real adjustment we're making to the shell, is this pin here and that pin there, and then this little part and the little pin there. Okay, so that kind of corner basically is where one of our posts are. You don't have to cut this, but it's much easier to line up the posts when you are reassembling everything if you cut those. So this is what it looks like zoomed in. Really, those parts are only used to hold some things in place that we're not going to need anymore. You still could reassemble the PSP even without those little parts there, so it's not any kind of drastic change. All right, we're going to zoom in here so you can see the very strange 4 exposed pads that Sony decided to use for their analog stick. So we have a custom ribbon cable. I've made some adjustments to it. I've added a stiffener on the same side as the pads so that it should stay connected to all 4 all the time. Before that, it was just a flat ribbon, and myself and many other people were having issues with 1 or 2 of the pads not being in contact, and so they couldn't do left or right or up or down. But in my experience with the stiffener, and you'll see in a couple seconds that it works fairly well. Then we'll take our little blue bracket. I print these in TPU, so if you're printing your own, I recommend doing it in TPU. The file size is really 4 TPU. You'd have to kind of adjust it a little bit if you wanted to do it in harder plastic. Okay, and then we're just gonna slide all our stuff in place, and we'll pull up both these ribbons here. Don't forget to do that. I had one person forget to plug in one of these ribbon cables, and they thought they broke their UMD drive, but they just didn't have this cable plugged in. So make sure we plug in both of these. Okay, that one goes there. It's pretty straightforward. And this one goes right there. So you'll slide that in place, use your finger here to put it back, and then I just use both ends of my tweezers at the same time to push these pins in place. All right, so that's all our ribbon cables for now. What we're gonna do is we're gonna take our white corner piece here. I'm only putting the right one in place. That one matters the most. Basically what this does is this holds the board in place. I have some pegs in the base of the shell that will assist with holding the board in place, but it's always best to do this because this adds some kind of secondary support. And if for some reason your peg breaks, you have that. You can also put the left side in. You don't have to, but I've been doing that more recently. All right, so here is the power cable we removed from our PSP. The left one is for the 3000s. Not all 3000s have the colors already. Most of them have that, but all 2000s are just completely black. So it's important to figure out which one is positive and which one's negative, okay? The left side, if you're looking at the exposed pads, is the positive side. And then it's center positive on the power in. So if you look at the back where the center line is and where that center pin is, that's the positive side. So it's super easy on the 3000s because they're already colored, but when it's just black, it's a little harder to tell. But you can see here how I'm doing it. This is the left side, right? If you're looking down at the pads. So this is super quick. You just I put a little bit of liquid flux on my cables, and then it's just a quick tap and you're good to go. All right, there are some big changes to the motherboard. Okay, I've added an extra left connector. That's for 3000s, so we won't talk about that too much. The big change for 2000s is it's only a 4-pin analog cable now. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're just gonna put some tin on these pads here. Okay, we have our positive to the PSP, and we have our positive and negative power in. Okay, all 4 of those pads will get tinned. And then there's also 2 pads on the back for the external LED. I've removed the LED from the board, so basically you have to have this LED connected. The board will still work 100% without this LED. You just won't get any of the light signals, so you won't really know it's on. So it's good to put this on, but if you really don't want one, that's okay too. You don't have to. The board will still work without it. But once again, super straightforward. Positive is red, negative is black. So positive goes to positive, and negative goes to negative. I twist my cables like this. You definitely don't have to twist them, but I found it's much easier to do cable management when they're twisted like that. Same thing here. Our positive in is that yellow barrel cable connector. So we'll do negative to negative and positive to positive. Ignore my shaky earthquake hands. And then we'll also grab our other end here. This is to the PSP, right? Because that's the power that goes to the PSP. And we'll do positive here and negative here. Okay, I've separated these pads. On the original design, it was all on 2 pads. And honestly, it just got a little cumbersome. So I separated the pads so it's easier to solder. All right, so now I'm gonna go over ribbon cables here. So all builds use the same center and right ribbon cables. So it's a 10 and the 14, you'll always have those two. Okay, but then in the 2000s, we're gonna use the left ribbon here for the 10 pin, and then we're gonna use our new custom analog here. You might already have this analog connected to your PSP. If you're following along, that's totally okay. I just have this set up the way I did so you can see it better. If you have it already connected to your PSP, you'll see me connect that later. All right, we're gonna throw some firmware on here. So we're just going to Stephens GitHub page, or you can follow the link through my website. There's a bunch of, basically on the header and all over the website are links to his web app. We're just gonna go to the program section. We're gonna do serial because we plugged in through our USB port, and then we'll just program it. It should run pretty much all by itself, and when it's finished, you just unplug it and you're good to go. Okay. Once you have firmware on there once, you can update wirelessly. I bought that super cheap Chromebook tablet for like 20 bucks online, so I can just do all this in the garage. I don't have to move anything. But you can test it now. Plug it in, hit the mode button once, and you should see some blinking LEDs, okay? If you hold down the mode button, it should blink in a pattern of 3 on, break, and then 3 on again. Okay, that's the configuration or Bluetooth mode. So I'm gonna show you guys on the tablet here. Once you have it in that BLE mode, we'll go to the configuration page, and then you just touch load mappings, and you want to get that BP32, and then pair. Okay, once you're paired up, you'll see this is the mapping page, okay? There are tons of things you can do with custom mappings. I'm gonna put a little video together showing you guys how I made a custom button mapping for me and my Katamari that lets you essentially use the DualShock 4 like you're playing Katamari on the PS2. So you can use both analog sticks to play Katamari. So there's a ton of stuff you can do here. You can change the color of the LED if your controller supports that. You also can have up to 10 mapping groups, and each group can have 30 mapped buttons. Okay, so there's tons of stuff you can do here. And once you've made all your changes, just make sure you hit save mappings, and that'll save to your mod board. Okay, and then this is new. We have a settings page that Stephens put together that let you do a ton of things, okay? But the biggest pieces here are you can change what the mode button does. So you can see here a single click, a long click, and a double click. We've left everything exactly the same by default, but if you really want to have a hard power off, you can have it set up like that. So I have it where it's single click is pairing a controller, holding it down is power off, and double click is Bluetooth mode. Low battery threshold is huge here. If your LED is blinking on your build very rapidly, that means your controller is low battery. You can set what that percentage is there. Cold and warm boots are super important for later, but if you're experiencing video out issues, read through those cold and warm boots and adjust those settings, and that might help you with your video out issues. All right, so we're gonna get our base ready to go now that our mod board is totally set up. We have our parts here. What I do is I connect all my ribbon cables before I assemble anything. This lets me test all the buttons, make sure everything is working the way that it should before I screw anything in place. All right, so we're connecting our center first. Now we're connecting our left ribbon cable here, and then our right will be after that. And really, this is pretty straightforward, right? The left cable is on the left side, the center cable is in the center, and the right cable is on the right side. But I've also have it labeled on the mod board so that you guys can remember which cables go where if you're ever lost, right? We have our left, we have our center, and then we have our right there. Okay, then we're gonna plug our power in. That goes in just like it did before. Okay, and then now we'll connect our 4-pin cable here into that analog spot. You can feed this through the bottom if you want. I usually just plug it in like this over the top. It doesn't really matter because it should be clear when you put it in the shell either way. All right, now we'll plug it into power and we'll give it a quick test. What I'm doing here is really just connecting a controller, because that's how we're gonna boot it up. So we're gonna press the mode button once to get it into that new controller pairing mode. Okay, we should see 2 blinks and a break, and then 2 blinks. Once we have that set up, we'll grab our DualShock 4 controller and put that into pairing mode. You do that by holding the share button down and the PS button, and it should start to blink rapidly on the top there. And then once it goes solid and red, the boot process is going to start. Now it takes about 12 seconds, and that's all really limited to the PSP. That has nothing to do with the mod board. It takes the PSP about 12 seconds to go from power on to booting. So a great way to test if your PSP is booting, if you're not sure, is to plug a memory card in and see that orange LED in the bottom there. That means our PSP has power and it's in the boot process, which is great. Okay, once that LED on the mod board goes solid, we should be fully booted, and if you have your video out cable plugged in, you should be getting a video signal. Okay, if you're not getting a video signal and you have everything plugged in the right way, you followed all these steps, there is a default button pairing that will let you force video out. You have to hold L1, R1, select and start, and then left on the D-pad. It's a little cumbersome, but if you hold that for 8 seconds, it should force video out to your TV, okay? So that's a great way to test. Maybe your PSP booted a little slower and it didn't quite get video out in time. If you're still not getting video out, then you're gonna wanna do some troubleshooting, and there's a bunch of options on the troubleshooting page on how to figure that out.
Hey, welcome to Steambot Chronicles.
But here we have Steambot Chronicles, and we are just running through our buttons here. I picked Steambot Chronicles because I can test all the buttons in the little name guide here. So we have up, down, left, and right on our analog stick, which is great as a first try on a 2000. You may not get it on first try. I really thought I would just be able to show you what it's like when it doesn't work, but unintentionally it worked on the first try with a new cable, which is great. So I'm actually messing it up here intentionally to show you guys what it looks like before, when it would just auto trigger. So right now we have some kind of poor connection between the ribbon cable pads and the pads on the PSP. And you may not notice that in a menu, so it's good to go into a part of the game where you have up, down, left, and right, because here you can see left and right are auto triggering, right? So it's just cycling through. I'm not doing anything. If this is happening to you, just adjust this blue part slightly. Just go back and forth a little bit until you get to a place where all of those pads are in contact, and then screw this little black screw into place. Okay, that should button up everything nicely. You should be good to go. You should have all the stuff where it needs to be. And it really should be there pretty sturdy at that point. You should be able to move it around and not have any issues. I still do a second test once everything's all assembled. So we'll move on to that stage and then we'll do a second test just to make sure everything's good to go. Because when I send stuff out to people, I want to make sure it works. All right, so we'll grab our base now, and all we're gonna do is just kind of fold our mod board down into place here. Make sure none of our ribbons are overlapping, make sure our buttons are free. Okay, it should go right into place. And then I'm just testing my buttons here to make sure they click well. You should hear some nice audible clicking sounds. And then we'll kind of fish our power cable through here. A bunch of jumble spaghetti wires. I know these ribbon cables could be shorter, but I personally find it easier to have maneuverability and longer cables than to have really short ones and be kind of really messing around and pulling on them and all that kind of stuff. So we'll take one of our extra black screws here and put it into place to keep that power cable where it is. And then this pin here is for supporting the analog ribbon cable if you really can't get that blue piece just right. So I'm breaking it off because we were able to get that blue piece right and then screw it down. You can still find it where with that screw down, you've manipulated the blue piece a bunch and it's still auto triggering. What you'll do then is that little peg adds some extra pressure to keep all those pins in place. But if you have it good like we do, we'll break that peg off. All 4 screws we just put into place, pretty straightforward. They should tighten down nicely. And then we'll just test our buttons again. And then all you have to do now is fold your PSP down, just like you did with your mod board. Okay, and those 4 screw holes from the front of our shell for our PSP should now line up with the pegs in the base. So just kind of tuck your wires in and tuck your cables in, but you can see in the corner there by Sony how that hole lines up just right. All 4 of those holes should line up perfectly. And then what I like to do with situations like this is I do opposing corners. So I'll screw in this corner and then I'll go to the opposing corner here and I'll screw in this one. And then we'll do the same thing. We'll go up here and then we'll do the opposing corner. There's another peg you probably noticed that's by the Sony symbol there. I leave that one in. That supplies extra support to the PSP if you don't have that right connector part in place. But either way, it's good because it helps keep the board in place so that when you put a UMD in, it doesn't displace it. Or if you want to do what I've seen some people do, they use PS Placeables as stationary battery chargers, which is cool. So you can keep that battery in there and then pull it out for using your normal PSP. All right, so you should have a stack of 8 magnets. I only put 2 in the corner there, but all 8 of those should go into the 4 corners and they should sit flush. Okay, so if they can be hard to push in, if you take something like your tweezers or like the back end of your tweezers to push them down into place, all 4 corners should be flush there. Okay, now we're gonna take our middle piece here and slot it into place, and then our LED, and then we'll take those 4 screws for our base, and they should just go in all 4 of those holes there. And that will connect our base to our middle, right? And now all 4 of these screws, same thing. They should bottom out, but sometimes the plastic is a little different or what you're using could be harder. So I'm using like a little electric screwdriver. But what I do is I put my finger on the other side of the hole so that I can feel when the screw comes through, because you want it to be flush on the other end. I've actually done this so many times now that I just know how many turns it takes before I have to stop my screwdriver. But here's the example with my finger there. So I'll just place it right over this hole here, and then we'll screw this into place, and you'll kind of feel the screw come up on your end, and that's when you want to stop. And that's flush. Okay, so now all 4 should be good to go. And basically the way that I designed the shell to work is the top magnets now adhere to those screw posts. Now we'll take our SD card and slide it into place. You should have a little SD card adapter that came with your kit. And then there's our 4 magnets like I talked about before, and it should just snap into place. And I buy very heavy duty magnets, so these should be a really good like locking seal. Shouldn't come off super easy. I did that intentionally. I wanted it to be a secure, sturdy placement. If you're getting a full build from me, this is how it will arrive. I put the SD card adapter into the battery compartment, and then I put the top back on and wrap that all up. I'm gonna pop the top off here and show you how to connect the cables. So power cable goes in pretty straightforward. The video cable goes in, and then the whole top closes over everything. I did this because there's no way to really butt up the end of the PSP to the back of the console without making it totally exposed and look really bad. So a removable top giving you access to that port was the solution that I came up with after a bunch of trial and error. So that's the magnetic top and whole point there. All right, so we're gonna test the UMD out now. We're gonna pop that into place and it should read totally fine. Once again, there's a couple of different troubleshooting options if you're having issues with your UMD as you're doing the build. Those options will be on the site, but basically it probably has to do with the motherboard of your PSP. There are two depression parts on the 2000 versions, one to tell the PSP the door is closed and one to tell it there's a UMD in place. If that motherboard isn't held in place well, then often those parts that are depressed don't get pushed all the way down, and the PSP has trouble reading it because it doesn't actually know there's a game in there. That's why it's important to have that little white piece in the corner or have that base peg still in place by the Sony logo in that front right corner. And then pretty much we're done now. We got it tested. We tested it out a second time. If you got gray feet from me because you bought a silver kit, or you just got the feet, I apologize. I don't know why. Only the gray feet are so hard to remove from the paper. Every other feet color that I have, remove no problem. So a little tweezers go a long way here in removing that paper base there. All right, but this is what it looks like all done. We've got our front buttons now as opposed to on the base. We have our full kit done. I wanted to add here at the end, if you cannot figure out the ribbon cable, you have messed with it, you have gone left, right, up, down, you feel like you've done everything possible to get that ribbon cable to work, you can go full scorched earth and solder directly to these pads. I will give you a billion words of warning. These pads are so sensitive. You'll see right here, I actually do what I've done many times, which is a little bit of heat on these will actually remove the whole pad. So I'm like, oh, let me adjust that. Oh, I removed the whole pad. So if you're really lucky, you can get all four soldered super easily. If you're not lucky and you remove all four pads, you can still solder wires, but you have to connect the wire to both of those little metal pins there. You can see I'm bridging the gap there with the wire. So all four of those are soldered, they're solid, good to go. And then I've exposed the pads on the back of the board so you can solder directly to these pads, and that will give you, with your 2000, 100% solid connection, and you'll never have to worry about that ribbon cable. Like I said, this is only if you really can't get that ribbon cable to work. The new adjustments to the ribbon cable have made them way more reliable. So I feel like very few people will have to do this, but this is if you really can't get it to work and you just kind of give up. So the ground connection is closest to the SD card holder, and then you just work your way down. I use 2 black and 2 red, but if you use different colors, that will help a lot. But ground is closest to the SD card holder. Feel free to pause or go back to check that out. Here you can see I soldered all my wires in one direction. It's important to do that, but I was dumb and I cut these cables too short. So I'm actually gonna remove these real quick, and then I'm just gonna solder them the other direction. They get in the way of ribbon cables if you do it that way, but I didn't want to recut wires and resolder it all. So I just moved them to the other side so that I could assemble this and it wouldn't be pulling or pinching or anything like that. Okay, so that's one way you can do it with the 2000s. So that's the full build guide for the PS Placeable using a 2000 version PSP. Okay, so what I wanted to do was thank everybody for all the support. As this video wraps up, I wanted to showcase Stephens' work on the web app. So there's a configuration and a settings page. I showed you some examples of that earlier in the video, but I want to show you a real use case for custom button mapping. Stefan has done so much work on this web app, and I personally feel like he doesn't get enough credit for all the work that he's done. Really, the mod board is his project. The web app is all his work. I've just redesigned the mod board to fit what I'm trying to do for this consolizer, and also the UMD shell and keeping access to that was, what I was a part of. And so I want to give credit where credit's due. Stefan's done so much work. He's really stepped up and helped in a lot of areas where he hasn't needed to, and people have asked for some features and have asked for troubleshooting help, and Stefan's, gone above and beyond. So I want to give him credit for all that hard work. But here, all I'm doing is I'm mapping the buttons to fit the Katamari buttons. On original PlayStation 2, Katamari was played with both joysticks being moved in direction that you want your ball to roll. On the PSP, they changed that to up on the D-pad and triangle at the same time. So I've just mapped those buttons to the left and right analog sticks, and here you go. You can see rolling both forward rolls our ball, both back rolls us backwards. Remember, anytime you make a custom button mapping, hit Save Mappings in the top before you start using those buttons. But you can see on the screen, right, it says forward and triangle, but I'm not pressing triangle. But because the mod board has that capability to do custom button mappings, there's so much possibility in how you can map and remap buttons to other, controller buttons. So I'm just kind of showcasing here, this is how you would play Katamari on the PS2. Really, it's just like playing Katamari on the PS2. It feels really good. And I think it's way more fun to play this way than the original way the PSP had you play. But if you've never played this game, it's really fun. I suggest getting it. All that to say, I want to just wrap this video up by saying thank you to you guys. Thank you for all the support for the project. This is something that me and Stefan just did because we thought it would be cool to have. And seeing so many people interested in it and getting so many orders has really blown me away. I've spent so much time every morning, night, and weekend since the video came out working on these builds. I really appreciate your patience. It's taken me a long time to get all these orders done, and I still have more to finish. So please continue to be patient with me as I do my best to get all these builds done for you. I'm gonna stop talking now and get back into the garage so I can actually get back working on those builds and orders I still have to fill. So thank you again, guys, so much. I really appreciate it.